sequel is called The Principal Chronicles 2 as well. Now, I'm just going to, for radio purposes, tell you what that looks like. It's number 2 / TOO / Roman numeral 2 / as well. David Garlick here in our studio. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, you have to dive into the title of that book first of all. How did you come up with that, and what were you trying to get across?
It's kind of a joke for teachers, but if you've ever been in school, I think you'll get the joke too. When I wrote the Principal Chronicles and I came up with the idea for the second book, I wanted them to look very alike. So it's the same cover except for a different color pattern, but I wanted people to know for a fact that it was a different book. So the Principal Chronicles 2 was always going to be part of the title, but then I realized I didn't know how I wanted to spell 2. Did I want TOO or TWO? And then I got the idea for the multiple choice question. And so that's what it is, except all the answers are correct.
It's not C, all of the above. It's D, all of the above.
Yeah. No, it's not D, all the above. It's not even E, A and C. They're all correct.
Tell us a bit about your career in education, a bit of your background that went into these books.
I graduated from Teachers College in 1983. I was a supply teacher for a number of years. It was very difficult to break into teaching back in the early 80s. So I was a supply teacher for most of the 80s. My first class, my in-school daytime class in about 1988. And then I taught until 1994 when I became a department head. And then in 1999, I was sort of pressed into service as a vice principal. And then I became a principal in 2002 and retired in 2016.
And what moment did you have where you decided that you needed to write some of this stuff down and publish it in a book?
That was back in my very first year of teaching. I would come home at the end of the day and realize that something goofy had happened to me. And I would just write it out. Sometimes just 2 or 3 sentences, just reminders. And then after I got married, I realized that my wife didn't want to hear these stories all the time because she ended up hearing them anyway. When I got together with friends on a Friday night or we had people over for dinner, I would always have to share a couple stories, which meant that Linda had to hear them a number of times. And so I thought if I write them out, reminders for myself, well, then I don't have to tell her all the time.
What has been the response from other people who are in the education system? Do they relate with some of these stories?
The nicest thing, and it turned out to be a purpose for the book, when people read the book, not just teachers, when people read the book, almost always, when they get to the end of a story, I hope they chuckle, almost always, but when they get to the end of a story, they almost always have to share something from their own life and their own experience, something similar or something opposite. And so what ends up happening is my book becomes the jumping off point for classroom discussions, for discussions among friends over a beer. It just becomes something bigger than it is. And people get to share their stories too.
Yeah, it sounds like a good book club book.
Thank you. Yes, I hope so.
Do people recognize themselves in your book?
The people who are actually there, usually I ask for their permission. If I'm going to put them in a story and it's anything remotely embarrassing, almost always if it's going to be embarrassing, it'll be embarrassing to me. But if it's at all has an opportunity to embarrass them, I'll ask for their permission. So I'll send them the story and I'll say, is it okay for me to publish the story with your name? And usually they say yes. Very rarely they say, I'm not comfortable with that. And then I'll fictionalize the story a bit more than it already is and change the name. I don't want anyone feeling embarrassed if they don't want to be embarrassed by it.
Yeah. What are some of the stories?
From both books or from the
From
new
this
book?
book specifically, yeah. Is there one there that you'd like to share?
I was talking to my wife about this last night. It's very difficult to share a whole story. Right. Because the humor comes from the entire experience, not just from a joke. So I do have one that's pretty short that I can share. I also have one that I can set up for you, read part of it, and then hopefully people will say, well, I have to read that story.
All right. So I want one with a good ending.
Okay. So then Linda, she asked for this one. Okay. My wife didn't want me to read this one.
Okay.
But you asked for it. And it's a very short one. It's called The Tattoo. One of my jobs as vice principal was to interview new kids if they came to the school at a time other than September or January and show them around the building. It didn't happen often, but when kids come mid-semester, they're coming to a new school with different rules, different teachers, different kids, and sometimes completely different rules. It's best for them to meet the vice principal and find out that he's not a jerk. Maybe he's somebody they can trust. Anyway, as I was finishing my interview and tour with one young woman, I noticed she had a tattoo of a naked woman on her shoulder. It looked homemade. It looked like the kind of tattoo a sailor might have had during World War II. I just noticed your tattoo. I don't think it's really appropriate for high school. Oh, she said. Geesh, sorry. I forgot all about it. I've had it since I was a kid. She was 16 at the time. Let me see. Can I borrow a marker? I happened to have a red marker in my shirt pocket, so I passed it over to her. She very carefully drew a bikini onto the tattoo and handed me back the marker. There. If I wear a short sleeve shirt again, I'll be sure to dress the lady better in future. Otherwise, I'll wear long sleeves, okay?
So good.
That's one of.
And did she?
Oh, yeah. She was never a problem for us. She was never a problem kid. She turned out to be a great kid. Wonderful student.
Yeah. That's so funny. How much is that representative of the type of tone the rest of the stories take?
I always want the majority to be funny, to make you laugh. But there are a number of stories that are more heartstring pulling that will make you reflect a little bit, maybe bring a tear to your eye.
All right. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you.